Last spring, I hauled 850 lb bags of chicken feed from my car to the coop. My back reminded me for 2 days. I thought, there has to be a better way. And there is. Our grandparents didn't buy bagged feed every month. They grew it once. In this video, I'll show you 4 perennials that feed your animals year after year. No replanting, no heavy lifting, just plant them once and they keep producing. If you're tired of feed store bills and sore muscles, this video is for you. I share forgotten systems like this every week. Subscribing means you won't miss the next one. Mulberry tree. This first plant matters because it solves a quiet problem that hits your wallet every month. Expensive protein. Our ancestors knew that a single tree could take the edge off their feed bill. Modern systems trained us to buy bagged corn and soy instead. The reason this mulberry system worked wasn't technology. It worked because it matched real life. Limited land, unpredictable seasons, and low cash flow. It didn't depend on feed deliveries or debt, and that's why it lasted for generations. Mulberry trees are native to much of North America, and European settlers brought improved varieties that thrived from New England to the Deep South. No irrigation systems, no fertilizer factories. Just a tree. Historically, all they needed was one mulberry sapling and a sunny spot near the animal pen. No specialized equipment. The practice was simple. Plant the tree, let it grow to about waist height, then prune the lower branches so leaves are easy to reach. No maximizing, just consistency. To maintain it, they focused on cutting fresh branches every few days and letting the animals eat the leaves directly. That alone kept the system alive. Now here's the part that actually makes this work. Over time, this didn't just provide free feed. It created a steady supplement, especially in late spring and early summer when leaves are most tender. I'm not saying you'll never buy feed again, but you'll buy less. Mulberry leaves contain good protein. Studies show between 15% and 25%. That's higher than most grasses. For a small flock of 4 or 5 hens, one mature mulberry tree can provide a couple of handfuls of fresh leaves each day. That's not half their diet, but it's a meaningful boost, and those leaves are free. No shipping, no lifting. One detail most people miss is that mulberry leaves are most digestible when they are bright green and fully expanded. Not the youngest buds, not the yellowing, older leaves. You don't need this to start, but it explains why some people think mulberries don't work. They offer the wrong leaves. Another forgotten trick. You can dry mulberry leaves in the shade, crumble them, and store them in feed sacks for winter. No freezer, no canning, just dry air in a dark shed. That dried leaf powder mixes into a warm mash for chickens on a cold morning, a healthy boost when bugs are scarce. For seniors, the mulberry tree is also a gift because it requires almost no bending or heavy lifting. Once the tree is established, you simply reach up or use a long-handled pruner to bring down branches. The animals will strip the leaves clean in minutes. Some heritage breeds of goats and sheep actually prefer mulberry leaves over grass. One caution, young trees don't produce much. Give it 3 years. This is a long-term investment, not a quick fix. White mulberry is the most common variety in the United States, and it is perfectly safe. Red mulberry is native and even better. Avoid the fruitless ornamental varieties. They often have lower leaf protein. If you have room for 2 trees, plant them 15 feet apart. They will produce more leaves than a dozen animals can eat, and that surplus can be shared with neighbors who raise rabbits or poultry. This is not a trend. This is a life-changing, self-sufficient system that has worked for thousands of years. The mulberry tree is a vault of free protein. Once you plant it, you never replant. It feeds your family's animals for decades. So that's mulberry, your protein source, but protein alone isn't enough. Animals also need minerals. That's where our next plant comes in, chicory. This second plant matters because it solves a quiet problem most livestock owners ignore: mineral deficiencies in bloat and grazing animals. Our ancestors understood that animals need more than just grass. Modern systems trained us to buy mineral blocks and bagged supplements, but chicory is a perennial that mines its own minerals from deep in the subsoil. The reason this chicory system worked wasn't complicated. It worked because it matched real life. Poor soil, dry summers, and animals that sometimes get sick on rich pasture. Chicory has a taproot that reaches down 3 to 5 ft. That root pulls up copper, zinc, sulfur, and manganese that shallow grasses cannot access. When animals eat chicory, they get those minerals naturally. No plastic tubs, no shipping costs. Historically, all they needed was a small patch of ground that was too dry or too rocky for corn. No specialized equipment. The practice was simple. Scatter chicory seeds once in early spring, then walk away. No maximizing, just consistency. To maintain it, they focused on one thing: mowing the patch twice a year, once in early summer before the plant flowers, and once in late fall after the first frost. That alone kept the system alive. Mowing prevents the chicory from becoming too woody and encourages new tender leaves. Now here's the part that actually makes this work. Over time, this didn't just provide free minerals. It created stability, reliable bloat prevention for sheep and goats, and less dependence on outside systems. Chicory contains natural compounds that reduce the risk of frothy bloat. A goat that fills up on lush alfalfa can die within hours. But if that same goat has chicory in its pasture, the risk drops dramatically. You might be thinking, this sounds like a lot of work: mowing, grazing rotations. But here's the truth. Even a small patch of chicory, left alone and cut twice a year with a string trimmer, will still produce leaves. You don't need perfect management. The plant is forgiving. And if you don't have goats, chicory works for rabbits, chickens, even tortoises. It's not picky about who eats it. One detail most people miss is that chicory is most productive when it is grazed or cut frequently, every 3 to 4 weeks during the growing season. You don't need this to start, but it explains why modern farmers who treat chicory like hay and cut it only once a year get poor results. Another forgotten trick: chicory's white root, when dried and roasted, makes a coffee-like drink that is naturally caffeine-free. That was a staple during the Civil War and the Great Depression. For a senior on a fixed income, that is a free, healthy alternative to store-bought coffee. Chicory is also a powerhouse for egg production. Hens that free-range on chicory lay eggs with darker, more nutrient-dense yolks. The leaves are high in vitamin A, vitamin K, and folate. Rabbits thrive on chicory as a daily green, and because chicory is a perennial, you plant it once and it comes back thicker every year. After 3 years, 1 lb of seed can produce over a ton of fresh forage annually on almost any soil that is not waterlogged. For seniors, chicory is ideal because it requires no heavy equipment. A handheld string trimmer or even a pair of shears is enough to cut it. You can dry the leaves as hay for winter, though most animals will eat it fresh. Chicory is also very drought tolerant. In a hot summer when grass turns brown, chicory stays green and productive. That means your animals stay healthy even when the weather's against you. One caution: chicory can be too rich for young lambs or kids if they eat nothing else. Always mix it with grass or other forages, and never plant chicory in wet, heavy clay. The taproot will rot. Well-drained sandy loam or even gravelly hillsides work beautifully. Chicory handles the minerals, but what about energy? In winter, animals burn calories just to stay warm. That's where Jerusalem artichokes shine. Jerusalem artichoke. This third plant matters because it solves a problem that hits every winter: carbohydrates. Most perennials give you leaves or protein, but animals also need energy, especially in cold weather. Our ancestors grew Jerusalem artichokes for that exact reason. Modern systems replace them with corn, which has to be replanted every spring. But Jerusalem artichokes are tubers. You plant them once, and they multiply underground like a savings account. The reason this system worked wasn't because of high technology. It worked because it matched real life. A small garden, a cold cellar, and animals that need calories without expensive grain. Jerusalem artichokes are native to North America. Native peoples cultivated them long before Europeans arrived. The name Jerusalem is a corruption of the Italian word girasole, meaning sunflower, because the plant is a sunflower relative. The tubers are knobby, sweet, and packed with inulin, a type of carbohydrate that does not spike blood sugar. That makes them healthy for both animals and humans. Historically, all they needed was a row of soil and a handful of tubers from last year's harvest, and no specialized equipment. The practice was simple: bury the tubers 2 in deep in the spring, then ignore them until fall. No maximizing, just consistency. To maintain it, they focused on one thing, leaving at least a few small tubers in the ground each harvest. That alone kept the system alive. Those leftover tubers become next year's crop automatically. Now here's the part that actually makes this work. Over time, this didn't just provide winter carbs. It created stability, reliable energy for pigs, rabbits, chickens, and even horses. Less dependence on bagged grain. One Jerusalem artichoke plant can produce 2 to 6 olbi of tubers in a single season, depending on your soil. That's an estimate, not a guarantee. Sandy soil and little rain will give you less. Rich, loose soil and regular water will give you more. But even a modest harvest is free food you didn't plant twice. For a senior with a few pigs or a rabbit hutch, that is a life-changing amount of free calories. One detail most people miss is that Jerusalem artichoke tubers get sweeter after a hard frost. You don't need this to start, but it explains why modern farmers who dig all their tubers in September are disappointed by the bland taste. The cold converts some of the inulin to fructose. Our ancestors waited until late November or even December. They dug only what they needed for a week or two, leaving the rest in frozen ground as a natural refrigerator. Another forgotten trick, Jerusalem artichokes are excellent for senior health too. The inulin feeds beneficial gut bacteria and helps regulate blood sugar. You can boil or roast the tubers like potatoes, but they have a fraction of the glycemic impact. For animals, the tubers can be fed raw, chopped, or cooked. Pigs will root them out of the ground themselves if you turn them into the patch after harvest. Chickens peck at small chopped pieces. Rabbits love them grated. And because the plants grow 7 to 10 or 40 tall, they also provide a windbreak or a living fence. The flowers are bright yellow sunflowers that bloom in late summer, beautiful and bee-friendly. One caution, Jerusalem artichokes spread aggressively. If you do not want them taking over your garden, plant them in a contained bed or along a fence line where you can mow around the edges. Some seniors plant them along a back fence line where nothing else grows. Also, with zero replanting, very little fertilizer, and only occasional watering once the plants are established. Though in a dry summer, a deep watering every couple of weeks will double your harvest. This crop is also a rare example of a perennial that actually improves poor soil. The deep roots break up compacted clay. The tall stalks, when cut in late winter, make excellent mulch. And because you never till, the soil biology stays intact. That is the opposite of industrial corn production, which destroys soil structure every year. For a senior looking to become more self-sufficient, Jerusalem artichokes are the ultimate set-it-and-forget-it crop. Plant them once in your lifetime. They will feed your family's animals for decades. So you've got protein, minerals, and energy. The last piece is fresh greens when everything else is brown. That's perennial kale. Perennial kale. This fourth plant matters because it solves a problem that hits every winter, fresh greens. Most animals can survive on hay and grain, but they thrive on fresh, leafy vegetables. Our ancestors kept perennial kale for that reason. Modern systems replaced it with annual kale that dies after one season, but perennial kale lives for 5 years or longer and produces leaves all winter in many parts of the United States. The reason this system worked wasn't because of greenhouses or plastic mulch. It worked because it matched real life. Cold temperatures, short days, and the need for vitamin-rich feed when everything else is brown. Perennial kale, also called cottage kale or Dobbinton's kale, is a rare variety that does not bolt to seed. It just keeps growing leaves from a woody stem. French and English villagers grew it for centuries. Historically, all they needed was a single cutting from a neighbor's plant. No specialized equipment. The practice was simple. Stick the cutting in moist soil in early spring, then water it once a week until it roots. No maximizing, just consistency. To maintain it, they focused on one thing, harvesting the outer leaves regularly, never taking the central growing tip. That alone kept the system alive. A mature perennial kale plant can produce a pound of leaves every week, enough for a dozen laying hens or a few rabbits. Now here's the part that actually makes this work. Over time, this didn't just provide winter greens. It created stability, reliable vitamins A, C, and K for animals during dark months. less dependence on shipped produce or expensive supplements. In Zone 7 and warmer, think Virginia, Tennessee, or the Pacific Northwest, it survives most winters with no help. In colder zones like the Midwest or Northeast, you'll need a simple cold frame or a thick layer of straw mulch. Even then, it may die back to the ground, but the roots often survive and regrow in spring. It's not indestructible, but it's tougher than any annual kale. One detail most people miss is that perennial kale becomes sweeter after a frost, just like Brussels sprouts. You don't need this to start, but it explains why some folks think kale is bitter. They're eating it before a frost. Another forgotten trick, you can propagate perennial kale indefinitely from cuttings. One plant can become 50 plants in 2 years with no seeds, no money, and no special skills. That is a rare superpower in the plant world. For a senior on a fixed income, this means free, healthy animal feed forever. One more thing, you won't find perennial kale seeds at the hardware store. You need a cutting from an existing plant. Search online for Daubenton's kale cuttings or ask a local gardening group. It takes a little more effort, but that's part of the vault. Preserving plants that aren't sold in big catalogs. For chickens, perennial kale leaves are a dark green treat that keeps egg yolks orange and shells strong. For rabbits, it is a safe daily green that prevents digestive problems. For goats and sheep, it is a nutritious browse that they will walk past grass to reach. And because the plant grows upright on a single stem, you do not have to bend down to harvest. The leaves are at waist height or higher, perfect for seniors with back or knee issues. This plant also works beautifully in a small space. A single 5-gallon bucket with drainage holes can support one perennial kale plant on a porch or patio. That is enough to supplement feed for a few backyard chickens or a pair of guinea pigs. For seniors in apartments or retirement communities with limited land, this is a game changer. You do not need acres. You just need one pot and one cutting. Perennial kale is also a productive gift to pass on to grandchildren or neighbors. When you have extra cuttings, you can root them in a glass of water and give them away. That spreads resilience. That is how knowledge and plants move through communities before shipping in supermarkets. This is not a forgotten plant because it failed. It is forgotten because it cannot be patented or sold as seed. Vault insight. Here is something rarely talked about. Most modern feed systems fail, not because the plants are bad, but because we replace perennials with annuals to sell more seed and fertilizer. That is not a conspiracy. That is simply how the industrial system evolved. A company cannot make money on a mulberry tree that you plant once and harvest for 30 years, but they can make money on corn seed that you buy every single spring, plus the nitrogen fertilizer, plus the herbicide, plus the diesel fuel for planting and harvesting. The system was designed for profit, not for resilience. Our ancestors were not poor because they were ignorant. They were resourceful because they had to be, and they chose perennials whenever possible because perennials meant survival. A Jerusalem artichoke patch that feeds the family pig through February is worth more than a bank account with no grocery stores open. Perennial kale that stays green under a foot of snow is not a hobby, it is insurance. Chicory that prevents bloat on a $3 goat is not a weed. It is medicine. Mulberry leaves that turn into free eggs are not a curiosity, they are wealth. The more natural the system, the more resilient it becomes. And the more resilient it becomes, the less you depend on outside systems that can fail. Supply chains, inflation, weather extremes. That is not nostalgia. That is biology, and it still works today, especially for those of us who value investment over expense. You do not need to go back in time. You just need to remember what worked. The vault is open. The knowledge is free. The plants are waiting. You do not need more land, more money, or a younger back. You need the right knowledge. Plant it once. Pick one plant from today, just one. Try it next spring. That is how forgotten systems come back to life. One small productive choice at a time. Mulberry chicory, Jerusalem artichoke, or perennial kale. Any of them will start you on a path to healthier animals and fewer trips to the feed store. If this story changed the way you look at the weeds in your garden or the trees in your yard, please subscribe and like the channel. We are excavating the history they tried to bury. Plant the future. The next treasure will be open soon.